Congress turned into a battlefield. Jim Jordan leaned on 17 years of loud authority and shaky legal claims, but Jasmine Crockett ripped open his weakness in the most basic principles of law. With verified statutes, hard evidence, and unshakable preparation, she exposed the hollow core of his power. Was this the day Jim Jordan's empire collapsed? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The Judiciary Committee room looked more like an arena than a chamber. Halogen lights blasted down so bright they bleached the walls, leaving no place to hide. The microphones hissed alive so sharp they caught even the smallest cough. Every seat in the gallery was taken reporters, crouched over laptops, cameras trained on the witness table, ordinary citizens who had lined up since 5 a.m., clutching their phones ready to stream history. The silence was so tight it felt like a wire about to snap. At the center sat Jim Jordan. White shirt, yellow tie, sleeves rolled. He leaned forward, jaw set, the smirk of a man who had won this fight 100 times. To him, this was another performance, another victim to bulldoze with speed and fury. Then Jasmine Crockett entered, a thick folder in her hands, tabs like neon knives. She didn't smile, didn't wave, she just read. Her silence was the threat. Everyone felt it. This would not be another Jordan show. Jim Jordan leaned into the microphone, his voice carrying like a command. The chamber snapped to attention as he began, every syllable hurled with the force of a man who believed himself untouchable. Ladies and gentlemen, he declared, our Justice Department has become a weapon. They are trampling the Constitution again and again. The First Amendment violated, the Fourth Amendment ignored, the Fifth and the 14th shredded before our very eyes. He did not pause. Brandenburg versus Ohio proves speech, no matter how fiery, is protected under the First Amendment. United States versus Nixon stands as proof that executive privilege shields the presidency itself when under assault. And Thompson versus Louisiana shows us clearly that warrantless government intrusion cannot and must not be tolerated. This department has crossed every line. Today, this committee must hold them accountable. His words fell like hailstones, fast, cold, and unrelenting. The audience soaked it in. Republicans nodded as if hypnotized, Democrats sat stone-faced, and reporters scribbled furiously. One Fox correspondent hunched over his laptop, typing the headline that seemed inevitable: Jordan crushes the Department of Justice. Cameras zoomed on his tightened jaw, his sleeves rolled high like a prize fighter ready for another round. Jordan looked victorious already, feeding on the silence, mistaking it for awe. But then Jasmine Crockett's microphone clicked on its green light, cutting across the room. She did not even glance at the witness. Instead, she turned her body directly toward Jordan. Her voice was calm, precise, almost surgical. Mr. Chairman, I want to revisit a few of the legal details you just cited. The chamber froze. The script had shattered. Members rarely spoke to the chairman this way, not with cameras rolling. Jordan's eyes narrowed, his brow furrowed. For a flicker, surprise broke his mask before he forced a smirk. He leaned back, attempting to project calm, but the tension was already tightening like a noose around the room. Jasmine pressed forward. Do you recall what year Brandenburg versus Ohio was decided? The question was delivered like a test. Jordan blinked, hesitated, then forced the word 1969. His tone suggested authority, but the pause betrayed him. Pens hovered over notepads, cameras tilted closer. Correct, Jasmine answered. Her voice sharpened. But you left out part of the ruling. It was not just about incitement. The decision required both the direction of unlawful action and the likelihood of that action occurring imminently. You cut the case in half, Mr. Chairman. The blow landed. A reporter's pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the floor. Democrats tried and failed to hide their smiles. Across the aisle, Republicans shifted in their seats, faces tight with unease. Jordan's color rose, his mask slipping. The gentle lady is splitting hairs, he snapped, voice edged with anger. Jasmine leaned in, her tone low but lethal. No, I am reading the law. And the law is not a game of words. The words sliced through the chamber. Reporters hammered at their keyboards, tweets exploding across timelines. For the first time, Jordan's greatest weapon, his unshakable confidence, showed cracks. He looked less like the master of the stage and more like a student caught unprepared at the blackboard. The chamber had shifted and everyone knew it. The crack in Jordan's confidence had shown, and he rushed to patch it over. He slammed the gavel hard enough that the sound snapped through the chamber like a gunshot. His voice turned sharp, almost biting. The gentle lady's time is for questioning the witness. I urge her to stay on task. He leaned forward, glaring, trying to drag the hearing back to the script he had mastered for years. The rhythm of control, the flow he had counted on, was slipping, and he could feel it. But Jasmine did not flinch. She sat perfectly still, her gaze locked on him, her hands resting calmly on the thick folder. The silence stretched every second louder than the last. Finally, she spoke, her tone measured and devastating. If the legal foundation is wrong, then this entire hearing is nothing but an empty stage. The words fell like stones into water, sending ripples across the room. The gallery froze. The only sound was the frantic clatter of keyboards as reporters hammered out the quote. It felt like a chessboard mid-match, Jordan, scrambling to maintain pace while Jasmine had just delivered a move that exposed his weakness. The air was suffocating like a violin string pulled to the breaking point. Everyone knew the next strike would be brutal. The silence of the previous moment lingered as Jasmine slowly reached into her folder. Papers rustled like the sound of a blade being drawn. She lifted a document high enough for every camera to see her voice steady and unshaken. This she said, holding it firm as Title 18, United States Code, Section 1512. It does not require the destruction of evidence. It requires only the obstruction of an official proceeding. Mr. Chairman, you have misrepresented the statute entirely. The words dropped into the chamber like cannon fire. Jordan snapped back, his face flushed, his voice rising to a shout. This is not a law school lecture. He pounded the desk with his fist, the sound reverberating across the horseshoe table. His frustration was naked, his authority fraying at the edges. Cameras zoomed in close, capturing every twitch of his jaw. But Jasmine did not raise her voice. She leaned in, her tone cutting like glass. No, this is the Judiciary Committee. If we cannot respect the law here, then who in this country will the line carve through the silence, leaving Jordan visibly shaken? Without warning, Jasmine turned another page and delivered the blow that sucked the oxygen out of the room. And now, she said coldly, let us address Thompson versus Louisiana. I have checked Westlaw. I have checked Google Scholar. I have checked the official Supreme Court database. This case has never existed. Mr. Chairman, you invented it. The chamber erupted in chaos. Reporters dove for their keyboards, fingers flying. Camera lenses snapped tighter, zooming on Jordan's reddening face. One Republican member sank into his chair, hand raised to cover his eyes, unwilling to meet the gaze of the room. Jordan's skin blazed red. His lips trembled as if the words caught in his throat. His hands drummed the table in frantic bursts, a sound more desperate than authoritative. The weight of the cameras bore down on him, the heat of the lights unrelenting. Jasmine did not blink. She pressed harder, her words delivered with ice. If I cited a fake case in a courtroom, I would lose my license to practice law. Tell me, Mr. Chairman, what consequences are there for doing the same here? The question sliced open the heart of the matter. It was no longer a clash of interpretations. It was an accusation of fabrication. Jordan's voice cracked as he barked, order, order in this committee, but the authority behind the gavel was gone. He slammed it down again, the sound wild and uneven, no longer commanding respect but begging for control. The chamber no longer belonged to him. The murmurs, the furious, typing the shifting eyes of his colleagues, told the truth. The reins of power had slipped. Jasmine sat calm, her documents neatly stacked, her expression as cold as stone. She had landed the strike that no one believed possible, and Jordan's collapse was playing out live for the entire nation to see. The room now felt like it was on the edge of explosion, every second heavier than the last, every stare locked on the man who once ruled it, but now looked undone. The gavel hit, the recess bell rang, and Jordan bolted from his chair. He shoved through the aisle, face flush, jaw tight, and slammed the door so hard the sound echoed back into the chamber like a gunshot. Inside the private room, fury took over. He hurled a stack of papers against the wall, pages exploding across the carpet. How did this happen? He barked, voice breaking with rage. His aides scrambled, one clutching a phone, another whispering frantically about damage control. The scene was chaos, a man who once ruled the floor now trapped in his own storm. Meanwhile, the Capitol hallways erupted into a frenzy. Reporters swarmed cameras, flashing microphones, raised voices overlapping. "This is a live shock," one shouted while another typed furiously, already feeding headlines into the world. The story was moving faster than Jordan could run. Back in the chamber, the contrast was striking. Jasmine sat calm, sliding her glasses off, sipping water with deliberate ease. She turned a page, marking a line with her pen, her expression unshaken. The silence around her was heavy, as if she held the room by simply breathing. It was the pause before the final round, and everyone knew the fight was only halfway done. The recess ended with a heavy clang of the gavel, but when Jordan returned, the man who strode back into the chamber looked nothing like the confident fighter who had opened the hearing. His skin was pale, his lips pressed thin, and in his hands he clutched a new stack of handwritten notes, pages bent and messy. He dropped into his chair with the stiff air of someone bracing for impact, his eyes darting toward the cameras, and then away just as quickly. The room had shifted against him, and he knew it. His gavel hand trembled as he tried to reset the rhythm of control. But Jasmine was waiting. She leaned forward, her voice calm but merciless. "Mr. Chairman," she said, every syllable crisp, "have you ever actually practiced law?" The words hit like a hammer. The chamber froze. Reporters lifted their heads, fingers hovering over keyboards, waiting for the blow to land. Jordan hesitated, his throat working against the silence. Finally, almost inaudible, he muttered, "No, I never took the bar exam. I've never tried a case in court." The confession slipped into the air like a crack of thunder. For a man who had built his brand as a master of legal argument, it was devastating. Jasmine did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She slid a fresh folder onto the desk, lifted a letter high, and spoke with deadly clarity. "I hold here a statement signed by 47 constitutional law professors, Republicans, Democrats, Independents alike. They have reviewed your claims, Mr. Chairman. Their conclusion is simple." She paused, her eyes fixed on him, as if daring him to look back. "Your statements reflect a fundamental misunderstanding of basic legal principles, and I quote, 'Such arguments would fail a first-year law exam.'" The line detonated across the chamber like dynamite. The reaction was immediate. Gasps shot through the gallery, reporters scrambled over one another, hammering at their laptops with feverish speed. Cameras zoomed tight on Jordan's face, catching every twitch, every bead of sweat sliding down his temple. On the Democratic side, members ducked their heads, shoulders shaking, as they fought to hide their laughter behind their hands. On the Republican side, silence reigned, a silence so heavy it felt like guilt. One member rubbed his forehead, another turned away entirely. It was the soundless collapse of solidarity. Jordan tried to fight back, his jaw tight, but the words would not come. He gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles whitened, but no denial, no counterstrike could erase what had just been spoken into the record. His identity as a so-called expert in the law had been gutted in public, exposed as performance rather than truth. Jasmine's gaze stayed fixed, her tone steady as ice. She had not only dismantled his arguments, she had shattered the mask he had worn for 17 years. The point was no longer whether he had misquoted statutes or twisted precedents. The point was that the very foundation of his authority, the image of a man who knew the law, was nothing but a hollow facade. The chamber erupted with noise, the sound of history being recorded in real time. The moment was no longer about a clash of words. It was about the destruction of an illusion. Jasmine had drawn the blade and cut through the disguise, leaving nothing behind but silence and shame. The roar of the chamber had not yet quieted when Jordan leaned into his microphone, his voice brittle, but still reaching for authority. "I have 17 years of experience on this committee," he said, his tone desperate, his eyes darting across the room as if searching for someone to nod in agreement. It was not a declaration of strength, but a plea, a crutch to lean on, now that the ground beneath him had cracked. The weight of his own words seemed to hang in the air, fragile and uncertain. Jasmine's response came like a blade drawn in silence, and then swung without hesitation. She straightened her back, her voice sharp, each word deliberate. 17 years of saying the law wrong does not make the law right. It only prolongs the deception of the American people. The line pierced through the chamber, and the gallery erupted in low gasps. Reporters' fingers slammed against keyboards, recording the strike as if it were history unfolding in front of them. On the Republican side, heads lowered, shoulders stiff. On the Democratic side, the restrained smiles deepened into something closer to awe. She did not pause. Jasmine opened her folder again, flipping to a marked page. Her eyes scanned the words and her voice grew colder, steadier like a judge delivering a sentence. Let me remind this committee of the statute regarding false statements before Congress. It is a federal offense. She held up a document for the cameras, the fluorescent lights glinting on its edges. I will be filing a formal complaint with the Ethics Committee. 43 documented falsehoods, 16 statutes misstated, 9 cases misrepresented, and 1 case fabricated entirely. Every word of it will be submitted into the record. The chamber felt as if the walls had closed in. The force of her accusation had turned the hearing from theater into trial. Jordan snapped. He lifted the gavel and pounded it wildly, the sharp cracks colliding with one another in a frantic rhythm. His face burned crimson sweat tracing down his temple. He slammed again harder until the handle split a jagged break, echoing the collapse of his control. Time has expired, he shouted, voice breaking, more a cry than a command. His hand trembled as he raised the broken gavel, a symbol of power now shattered in his grip. The room buzzed with shock, the image seared into every camera lens. Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes locked on him, unblinking. Her voice cut through the noise with calm ferocity. Truth does not expire, Mr. Chairman. The line landed like a final verdict, undeniable and unforgettable. For a moment, the chamber froze, suspended in her words. It was the strike that ended the fight, not with volume, but with certainty. Jordan stood, his movements jerky, his papers clutched in his fist. He turned and walked out, the broken gavel still in his hand. The chamber exploded, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing in rapid bursts, Democratic aides whispering furiously as Republicans sat stiff in silence. The sound was a storm of chaos history written in real time. And at the center of it all sat Jasmine Crockett. She did not rise, she did not smile. She folded her folder close, rested her hands lightly on the desk, and looked out across the chamber with eyes like steel. Her face remained calm, not triumphant, but resolute, the face of someone who had not sought spectacle, but fulfilled a duty. The cameras found her locked onto her expression, and the image froze into memory. The flashes were still going off in the hearing room when the networks cut their regular programming. CNN went live with a banner screaming, "Breaking Jordan, Shaken Crockett dominates." MSNBC followed its anchors, leaning in voices thick with awe, as they called the clash a turning point in congressional history. On Fox News, chaos reigned. Producers scrambled behind the camera's anchors, repeated vague talking points, but there was no spin ready for what millions had just seen. The footage was looping nonstop, Jasmine Crockett, calm and steady, shredding Jim Jordan, with nothing but law and preparation. The contrast was too stark to ignore. The academic world moved even faster. Within 24 hours, professors at Harvard, Yale, and Georgetown had clipped the video and dropped it into their syllabi. This, said one professor to his students, is the Crockett moment. Watch how preparation dismantles bravado. Lecture halls buzzed with conversation. Students whispered that they had never seen a member of Congress weaponize legal knowledge so precisely, so devastatingly. One veteran law scholar wrote, "This will be taught for decades. She didn't just win a political fight, she showed us the difference between pretending to know the law and truly knowing it." The phrase spread like wildfire, the Crockett moment. But what stunned the nation even more was the humanity under the fireworks. Jasmine had never raised her voice. She had never resorted to spectacle. Her power came from precision, from timing, from hitting with facts exactly when the room least expected it. The truth doesn't need to shout, an MSNBC commentator said on air. It just needs to arrive at the right place at the right moment. That's what Crockett proved. On social media, people called her the gatekeeper of legal truth. Memes painted her as a calm sentinel holding back the flood of misinformation. In a landscape where shouting often drowned out substance, her quiet precision became a kind of rebellion. Then came the machinery of Congress itself. The House Ethics Committee formally received Jasmine's complaint, stamped and logged with the weight of 43 false statements, 16 statutes, 9 misrepresented cases, and 1 fabricated ruling. It was not just theater anymore. It was process. What shocked Washington was that several Republicans crossed the aisle and voted to enter the complaint into the official record. It was unprecedented. Colleagues of Jordan, many longtime allies, agreeing that the matter could not be buried. The look on Jordan's face when that tally came in ashen hollow stun told the story of a man watching his fortress crumble from within. Outside the chamber, the political fallout scorched fast and hot. Donors who had once written six-figure checks to Jordan's campaigns began to pull back. "We can't invest in someone whose credibility is gone," one anonymous donor told Politico. In Ohio, challengers smelled blood. Local headlines called him weakened, his once unshakable base wobbling. Pollsters reported a double-digit drop in approval in his own district. For a man who had branded himself the untouchable warrior of the right, it was a collapse, both public and humiliating. His empire, built on the illusion of legal expertise, was disintegrating in real time. Meanwhile, Jasmine's star shot upward. Members of Congress who had once overlooked her began seeking her counsel. In closed-door meetings, when debates over constitutional issues grew heated, someone would say, "Let's hear what Crockett thinks." It wasn't just Democrats. Republicans, too, started slipping into her office, papers in hand, asking quietly, "Can you look this over?" Her desk became a magnet for anyone who wanted not spin, but clarity. The irony was brutal. Jordan had spent years claiming to be the party's legal attack dog. Now, even in his own caucus, eyes turned to Jasmine when the law came up. She had become the authority. Cable news hosts filled hours dissecting the moment. CNN ran a special titled "The Fall of Jordan, The Rise of Crockett." MSNBC aired a primetime panel that compared her to legendary courtroom figures in American history. Even international outlets weighed in. The Guardian wrote, "An American congresswoman just exposed a titan of bluster, proving that knowledge can still unseat arrogance." The phrase "truth beats theater" trended on Twitter, echoed by millions. Students, activists, even judges reposted clips with hashtags that kept the story alive for weeks. Back in academia, the Crockett moment evolved into something larger. Mock trials at law schools began inserting Jordan-style misquotes into exercises, daring students to catch them the way Jasmine had. Professors smiled as students raised their hands and said, "That's not what the statute says." The discipline of checking facts, of refusing to let authority substitute for truth, became fashionable again. "She has reminded us of the most basic lesson in law," one dean declared. "Preparation wins." Yet through all the fire, Jasmine remained measured. She told MSNBC, "This was never about me against Mr. Jordan. This was about the law. If we let falsehoods go unchecked, we erode public trust in our institutions." Her words carried weight because she had proven them under pressure. She became the unexpected moral compass in a Congress so often accused of gamesmanship. To millions of ordinary viewers, she was the embodiment of a simple but radical idea: facts matter. For Jordan, the descent was merciless. He tried to mount counterattacks, appearing on talk shows, insisting he had been ambushed. But hosts pushed back, asking him to restate the cases Jasmine had cited. Each time his answers faltered. Each time clips of his stumbles went viral. One night on a conservative podcast, when asked about Brandenburg versus Ohio, he stumbled again, prompting the host to shift uncomfortably in his chair. The damage was irreversible. The image of Jordan as a legal titan was gone. What remained was a man whose confidence had been mistaken for competence. The lesson of the clash reverberated across institutions. Universities, bar associations, even media outlets began talking about a new standard: the Crockett Standard. It was the idea that legal claims made in public must be accurate, documented, and verifiable. No more invented cases, no more sloppy citations. "This is how democracy protects itself," one scholar wrote, "by demanding accuracy from those who speak with authority." The phrase spread, adopted not just in Washington, but in classrooms and newsrooms nationwide. The lasting image, however, was not Jordan's collapse, but Jasmine's composure. Cameras had caught her in that final moment, seated still, eyes sharp, face calm, as the chamber around her exploded into chaos. That picture became iconic, printed on magazine covers, circulated online with captions like, "Strength is calm and truth needs no shout." People saw not just a politician, but a guardian, someone who reminded them that power could still be held accountable. The clash did not end with broken gavels or red faces. Its real legacy was the message it left behind: that careful preparation and real knowledge can defeat arrogance that has festered for decades. It proved that in an era of noise, substance still mattered. And it left America with a symbol, a freshman congresswoman who walked into a room stacked against her and walked out having redrawn the lines of power. The fallout from that hearing did not end in the headlines. It reshaped Congress itself. Within months, the House passed what came to be known as the Crockett Rule. It required every committee hearing that dealt with constitutional issues to have an independent legal advisor present, tasked with immediately correcting false or misleading claims. The rule was not symbolic, it had teeth. From then on, no member could rattle off fabricated cases or twisted statutes without being fact-checked in real time. Some members grumbled, but the vote carried bipartisan support. The chamber that once cheered on Jordan's bravado now acknowledged the need for legal guardrails. The Capitol had absorbed the lesson unchecked arrogance could no longer masquerade as expertise. The media evolved alongside it. CNN and MSNBC launched a new recurring feature called the Crockett Check, a live segment, where constitutional scholars broke down political claims in real time. Anchors would pause a speech, turn to a legal expert, and ask, "Is this true?" Millions tuned in, fascinated by the clarity that emerged when rhetoric collided with law. Even skeptical networks had to adapt. Fox News, caught flat-footed in the original moment, quietly hired more legal analysts determined never again to be blindsided. Across the media spectrum, fact-checking stopped being an afterthought and became primetime content. Viewers had seen Crockett expose the fragility of bluster, and now they wanted accountability baked into the broadcast. Beyond cable studios, the ripple reached classrooms. At law schools across the country, students formed groups calling themselves Crockett Watch. They weren't content to sit in lecture halls. They tracked speeches, committee hearings, and campaign rallies, posting instant fact checks online. Their feeds gained traction, amplified by journalists and professors alike. Soon "Have you been Crockett Watch" became a running joke among politicians on Twitter. But behind the humor was fear. Nobody wanted to be caught on the wrong side of their scrutiny. The younger generation of lawyers had found a mission guarding the truth where politics tried to bend it, and it spread even further into the streets and homes of ordinary Americans. For decades, legal language had felt like a fortress reserved for professionals and wielded by politicians to intimidate. But after Jasmine Crockett's performance, that wall cracked. People began pulling up statutes on their phones, quoting rulings in town halls, asking pointed questions in school board meetings. "The law isn't just theirs," one activist said on national television. "It's ours too." The idea that ordinary citizens could demand accuracy, could challenge falsehoods with evidence, began to take root. Law was no longer distant. It became a weapon for anyone willing to read and verify. For Jordan, the reckoning was brutal. Months after the clash, he sat down with a small paper in Ohio. His words were stripped of bluster, his voice described as weary. "I was too confident," he admitted. "I lacked the knowledge I should have had. That's on me." It was one of the rare moments in his career when he allowed humility to break through the armor. The confession stunned many critics, saw it as too little too late, but supporters admitted they had never heard him speak so plainly. It was a small, almost fragile acknowledgement that his persona as a legal warrior had been nothing more than performance. Jasmine, meanwhile, refused to indulge in triumphalism. Interviewed days later, she brushed aside suggestions that she had orchestrated Jordan's downfall. "I did not set out to tear anyone down," she said softly. "I only set out to defend the truth. If we do not protect it here in Congress, then where else can it survive?" Her words struck a chord far beyond Washington. She was no longer just a lawmaker. She had become a symbol of what public service could look like when rooted in preparation and honesty. That humility only deepened her authority. The lesson hardened into 3 unforgettable lines that ricocheted across media classrooms and living rooms alike. Knowledge is greater than confidence. Preparation is greater than spin. Democracy survives only when the truth is defended. They were painted on posters at rallies, quoted in graduation speeches, written on whiteboards in law school classrooms. The phrases condensed the meaning of the Crockett moment into a creed, a compass for those who wanted a politics built on reality rather than spectacle. The legacy crystallized into what scholars began calling the Crockett lesson. Law schools taught it in first-year classes, pairing the video of the hearing with case studies of constitutional interpretation. Political science courses dissected it as a model of how one prepared voice can shake an institution. Civic organizations used it in workshops, showing citizens that accountability is not abstract, but immediate, not distant, but personal. Even in popular culture, it echoed documentaries, replayed the exchange, dramatizations retold it, and late-night hosts repeated her line, "Truth does not expire." The Crockett lesson became more than a teaching moment. It became a civic inheritance. Children writing essays about democracy cited it. Journalists invoked it when challenging officials on live TV. Citizens carried it into protests, scrawling the words across cardboard signs. It became the benchmark when politicians made bold claims. Someone would always ask, does this meet the Crockett standard? The name alone was enough to make speakers pause before twisting the law. For Congress, for the media, for students and citizens alike, the impact was seismic. A single hearing had torn down a facade built over decades, replacing it with a new expectation that facts matter, that law is not theater, and that arrogance crumbles before preparation. The image of Jasmine Crockett sitting calm amid chaos, folder in hand, became etched into the collective memory. It was not just a victory for her, it was a reminder for everyone that truth, when wielded with precision, can still shake the foundations of power. And in the end, that was the message that endured. One person armed with preparation and committed to truth can challenge a system bloated with arrogance. Knowledge had outmatched confidence. Preparation had defeated deception. And democracy, at least for that day, had been guarded by the quiet strength of one woman who refused to let lies go unchallenged. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything, like subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.